ambushed in the middle of the night by wolves, fighting for our survival, a holy temple seemingly taken over by the undead. Today, we'll be doing our first recap of the Divine Strike Force, the second campaign I've ever been in, with my character here, Darian Rethwyn, a sorcerer paladin multi-class character. My name is Sergio, and welcome to Assume Control. This is a channel about learning Dungeons and Dragons by digging into the details ourselves and making mistakes. A note before starting, I'm a new player, relatively speaking. I've only been in less than a handful of sessions now, and these videos will intentionally be from that beginner's perspective. I'm giving my own takes here and calling out what's confusing and doing my best to understand how things actually play at the table. Today, we'll be going over episode 1 of that Divine Strike Force campaign and kind of take a look at the good, the bad, and just some general takeaways that I had after going through the first session here with this character. Got the character sheet up here just to kind of lay the groundwork here and remind everybody what this character is. So this is a level 5 character. This is where we're starting at with this campaign. I've decided to go the multi-class route as we had manually rolled ability scores this time around, and I rolled well enough that I felt confident going for a multi-class build, though, we'll kind of see how the campaign goes and we'll see how far into Paladin I end up going. I believe in my build video previously for this character, my intent was to go level 5 Paladin and then the rest Sorcerer. After this first session, and we'll see how the next one goes, part of me is leaning towards perhaps stopping at level 3 Paladin and really leaning into that Sorcerer aspect. But again, we'll see how that kind of plays out. So just a really high level recap, Darian is a Draconic Sorcerer, and the intent is to go Oath of Vengeance Paladin for those two subclasses there. And I am a dex-based, dual-wielding caster, martial hybrid, sort of spell sword type character here, using the short sword scimitar combo and getting my unarmored defense from that Draconic Resilience, and then leveraging sorcery points and all my spell casting to apply some control to the enemy in the battlefield, or to do additional burst damage if I needed to on a particular turn. Some things to kind of go over in terms of items really quickly, as I think this is adding some context here. My character is starting with a Bloodwell Vial. This is sort of part of the character backstory, and so it's something that I really need to hone in, and I think it'll come up when we go over the pros and cons of my gameplay during that first session. And then we also started with an uncommon item of our choosing, and I went with the Cloak of Protection, bringing me up to that 18 AC and adding one to my spell saves, or my saving throws. Over on the left, I have that +1 from the cloak. Some other high-level things, I was sort of thinking about what items I should be looking to get in the future. This is definitely something I would love everyone's input on. I do have the Arcana proficiency as well as Smith's tools. This is sort of part of my martial abilities, and it's kind of how I've leaned into that. So I'll likely be focusing on, in terms of crafting, it'll be maybe a split between maybe making scrolls and making weapons. I'll have to kind of see how I want to play that out. I do have calligrapher's supplies as well. And so as far as scrolls, I know that they kind of differ based on the level needed in terms of time and money. Pulling up the section here on scribing spell scrolls, you can see the table down here for the time and the cost. As far as what spells I would scribe, it maybe would be shield scribed spells. The shield scrolls could be useful for myself and for allies potentially. So if I were to make any, I think it would be for the shield spell. That's a level 1 spell, so it does just take the 1 day and 25 gold. I do need that downtime, and so I would need to be able to sort of spread out that 8-hour requirement per day. For the most part, if I were to scribe any spell scrolls, it would be those shield spell uses. Alternatively, it could be something like Divine Favor or Smite as well, if I feel like I need more on the damage side. Again, could also be useful for my allies if they wanted to get additional damage, but the shield is probably the most generally used spell here. In the event that I go more caster heavy in a particular fight, it still would be useful regardless of whether I'm meleeing or casting. And then when it comes to crafting magic items, I would be focused probably on weapons. We do have somebody with a Weapon of Warning already in our party. Wouldn't hurt to also have one myself as well, just in case we are divvied up in a larger area, or we end up getting split up or what have you. You can see it down below the table for crafting there. Uncommon taking 10 days and 200 gold, so definitely something that would require a clean break in the sessions, unlike kind of where we left off, in order to have that time in between to have said that we've worked on these things. I have a few items here that are of interest. In terms of an uncommon item, we have the Amulet of the Devout. Again, just giving me more to my spell attacks and my saves as well, just really solidifying my defensive and my offensive capabilities there with magic, and gives me one more use of Valve Enmity later on, or one of my other Channel Divinity options. Maybe not a huge priority, but very useful. Boots of the Winding Path. This is much more niche of an item, and definitely something that I think will come up less often, and I feel like maybe sometimes playing around this can maybe reduce the effectiveness of your turns because you're having to do some weird stuff in order to make sure that you can see the spot that you want to teleport back to. There's the classic +1 weapons here for scimitars. For casters, how do you typically gain something like this? Are there staves or wands that would give you +1 to magic and spell save DCs? I am curious about that, but again, this is sort of like an easy pickup in terms of increasing my accuracy with my weapons. An honorable mention here, the winged boots. I don't think these are going to be allowed in the campaign. I think they shouldn't probably be allowed just because they change the dynamic of fights so much. If you're able to just go up into the sky and start raining down damage where you're completely safe and immune to any damage for the most part. So yeah, this is just sort of on the back burner. In the event that they do become available, definitely would be something I'd be interested in taking. If there are other items that you know are pretty good, as well as maybe looking also at rare items, something to keep an eye out in the future, let me know if there are paladin or sorcerer items that are pretty crucial. I think so far we're sticking to the 3 attunement slot cap, but we'll see kind of as the campaign goes on. I think this is something that gets changed pretty often by DMs just because so many things require attunement, and it can be kind of lame that your character is sort of capped on all these items. Okay, jumping over to the review of my gameplay. So we're going to start off with the good. At the top here, I think my overall positioning was quite solid. I think I was able to leverage the fact that I am a little bit tankier, a little bit more robust, even though I'm a sorcerer, to protect and position myself in a way to make sure that enemies wouldn't crawl up next to us. Our first combat of the session was an ambush in the night by a number of wolves in a forest along a path we were walking and camping on. Luckily, we did set up a sort of situation where myself and a fellow party member were on lookout, and we had a little campfire, and our ranger, who had their weapon of warning on them, was sort of smack dab in the middle, and so, we were able to make sure that we had advantage on that initiative roll, kind of canceling out the surprise situation. I think surprise changed in 2024 compared to 2014. I forget exactly how that is. I think maybe previously, maybe it operated more like Baldur's Gate 3, where you get that surprise round, whereas now maybe it's like a disadvantage on initiative or something along those lines. But either way, the weapon of warning is still very crucial in that moment to make sure that we could all roll well and be able to actually fight. Number 2 here, mixing martial and magic. I think I did a good job of leveraging my positioning along with being able to use my swords and actually deal decent damage, and then switch to using my magic when needed, when enemies were too far or I was in a strong position and didn't want to give up where I was. It's really nice to be able to flip between the two and deal really good damage either way. This third one here, kind of outside the game here, but it was above table helping other players, and so despite myself only having a few gameplay sessions under my belt, a few of the other players had even less, and so it was really cool to be able to go around, help them with kind of understanding their abilities, what options maybe they have on their turn in terms of what they could do, and even helping some of the players choose their uncommon item to start with. And so that was really cool to be able to give some guidance, and that I'm learning a few things here and there. I obviously don't know every class and subclass, and so I could only really offer like general advice or maybe what I would be looking for. But it's really cool to see everybody learning the game together. And, I look forward to, several sessions down the road, kind of looking back at this one and going, man, we were such noobs back then. We have way more solid tactical understanding of the game now. Strategic decision making, the last point here. I think overall, I was able to sort of call out commands, very brief commands, only like a couple words long, either telling people to fall back or to follow or to do certain things in terms of commanding other players or anything like that, but giving out sort of really quick, helpful, short advice. Again, trying my best not to try to strategize extensively in between turns. All right, the bad. Now, this isn't necessarily explicitly like awful things, but areas where I need improvement, we'll say. The first one here is social navigation. I think I'm the only charisma user in the party, and so that means there's another paladin, but I think my charisma is higher because I am not focusing on my melee as they are. I can lean in more into my spell casting and my charisma needs. And because of that, that makes me very likely to be the party face in many situations. Definitely not something I'm used to in my other campaign, my one other campaign that I started playing D&D with. I'm a ranger, so and we have a warlock in our group, but for the most part, we kind of share that party face sort of responsibility between all of us since we aren't super great at it. But in this particular case, I definitely have the highest charisma, and so learning to figure out how to navigate NPC dialogue, making sure that we're getting what we need without, pushing the boundaries on who my character is and how they would act in certain situations. This is definitely something I'm going to be learning over the course of these sessions. Second point here, heroic inspiration and innate sorcery, and I suppose maybe resources in general. I completely forgot about heroic inspiration, as I did back in my ranger campaign. It's just not super obvious on the character sheet. It's kind of just there. It is at the top, but it kind of blends into the background. So I think I'm going to be bringing a coin with me as a physical representation next time that I have it. But just need to make sure that I'm using my resources. I didn't use innate sorcery a single time, and so we'll look to do that as we go forward. And of course, I have that Bloodwell vial, so I should be a little bit more loose with my sorcery points if the situation calls for it. The third one here, grappling before thinking. We'll get into kind of where the end state was for that session in terms of where we are in our combat. We did end up having to call the session in the middle of combat, so we'll kind of return to that in the next one. But in that fight, I ended up grappling, and I didn't really think of the consequences. I was mostly just trying to keep a person from running around or doing something. And I kind of forgot that meant I can only hit them with my one weapon once every single turn. And so it was a little bit of a downside. Probably could have brought this person down in that time that we had if I had access to both my weapons or to be able to cast and that sort of thing. So it's definitely something where maybe I'll look for an alternative option next time. The last one here, fights in the dark. Now, this is something that also came up in the Ranger campaign. I'm human in both of my campaigns. And as a part of that, that means I'm not exactly capable of seeing in the dark or have dark vision or anything like that. Now, luckily, as a sorcerer, I have access to dancing lights, and so during that ambush on us with the wolves, I did have that already precast as I sort of stood watch before the ambush occurred. And then we were able to use like the campfire light, and there were sort of other sources of light throughout the fight, such as one of our party members hitting a wolf with a fire spell and kind of igniting them as they died. And so they kind of acted as a small little bonfire to fight the rest that were in the area. But it's definitely something I'll have to keep an eye out for. I do have dark vision as a spell slotted, I believe. But yeah, we'll kind of see how that works out in the future. I really don't want to be caught in the dark and not be able to do very much. So, all right. So wrapping up before we jump into sort of the game state map that I have drawn out. Balancing resources. This is definitely going to be a learning curve. I think I need to definitely take notes as to what felt good, what felt bad. And I think I need to push the limits. I think I need to burn resources and really see what this character is made of, see what that feels like, and see where those boundaries are in terms of needing to save spell slots, sorcery points, or things like my innate sorcery. Really need to push the buttons and see how it ends up feeling as we go forward. Second key takeaway here, we have a large party. We have 9 players in this campaign. And what that means is that the DM is going to be leveraging mob swarms. So depending on the fight, obviously, we're more likely to end up having sort of a few tougher enemies, and then a large number of smaller enemies that sort of skitter around and sort of add HP to the pool. And so there's going to be a little bit of a focus here on AoE damage. I definitely will be looking to take the meta magic option where I can sort of immune people from my fireball cell save in the future. I think that's like careful spell or something. I forget what it's called, but the one where you can select targets and they auto save on your cast. And so, ideally, I'm going to be leveraging fireball quite a bit in order to chunk down these swarms of mobs. So I'll be taking a look at those options as well as we move forward in terms of new spells for my spell list. Third one here, kind of a no-brainer, but something to remind myself. My HP and my AC don't make me invincible. I have a very good AC, and I have really good HP compared to other people, just because I'm taking the tough feat, and my Draconic Resilience is giving me HP. And so it can be very easy, especially at these earlier levels, to feel like you're kind of a god running around. But I do need to make sure that I'm not positioning myself in a way that makes me susceptible to easy damage or easy crowd control, or anything like that. I can still be hit. In that wolf ambush, I actually got hit twice, surprisingly, by wolves. I think one of them actually got through a shield spell, which meant that wolf rolled really, really well. Basically a 19, very likely. And getting hit twice doesn't feel good, especially with my AC being so high. So trying to avoid damage is always the best defense, so I'll keep that in mind. The last point here, the need for foundational party strategies. Now, we have a lot of people, and we are a group of people who are kind of all beginners for the most part. And so I think what will behoove us when we get into the next long rest, we have met each other for the first time for the most part. A few people know each other based on their backstories and kind of where they're from. But I think something that we'll have to sit down and think about in our next down rest maybe is, what are we trying to do as a group? What are our go-to strategies? What are some foundational principles we want to stick to? Which of the three melee that exist, myself, the barbarian, and the other paladin, who will dive into the front? Who's going to stick back to make sure our allies don't get caught? I think ideally that would be me, staying back, as I can still cast and then run in if needed. And then how do the ranged want to kind of position? What are their general ideas? Are they going to clump up in smaller subsets? Are they going to fully spread out? What is the idea there? And so we'll kind of learn this as we go through fights, and people, either get punished for their position or, what have you. So there's definitely going to be a need to figure out what our core principles are as a group. So those were kind of the main broader takeaways, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But here I want to kind of finish this video up by kind of reviewing the end state. Now, I did mention that we had the wolf ambush during the night. That was kind of our warm-up fight. It was, I don't even know how many wolves. It was like maybe 9 or 10 wolves in the end. A couple of like alpha wolves and stuff like that. But we were able to get through that one relatively unscathed. The few shenanigans were had. A lot of fun seeing the new players kind of get in there and start using their abilities. But, we made our way to this temple, and, something was definitely off. We were obviously told to come here to kind of take a look. They had not communicated with the outside in quite some time, and there were reports of supplies being left outside despite them normally taking them the day of, things like that. And so, we arrived, we managed to get in finally after having to threaten the guard. This was sort of like the social area that I feel like I could have navigated better, but that person was not budging, let me tell you. But eventually somebody came to the door, the warden, the sort of like elder of the temple came and kind of invited us in, was playing things up, and kind of gave us a little tour after a little bit of discussion. I had asked for a little bit of a tour of the outer courtyard area, not this area that you're seeing, but outside, the entrance there at the bottom. And kind of as we went along with the tour, I tried a couple of different ways to kind of inspect what were the supposed robed monks kind of standing around, all around the courtyard. Didn't roll well enough to really see. I had my suspicions that these were not alive monks, but I couldn't really prove anything without triggering, all out aggression on us. And so I kind of suggested that, we could get something signed by the warden as confirmation for the church that we were kind of operating with, that everything was okay. And so the warden agreed and invited some of us in. A party member did attempt during that tour to cast, I think, see invisibility was what they attempted to cast. Obviously, that's casting magic, and in this particular case, the warden does not like when magic gets cast in this sort of sanctuary. The supposed warden. And the artificer who attempted to cast that did not roll well enough to kind of mask their ability to cast that. And so the warden did catch them and did scold them quite harshly for attempting that. And because of that, I didn't want to antagonize further. And so when we were invited in to their office, or to walk into the temple here and thus into their office to get the paperwork signed, I took only a handful of people with me. I left the remainder of the party outside, and we sort of ventured inside. So something that happened way at the entrance of the temple in general, before we were, when we were talking to the guard, the entry guard monk, one of our rangers actually went invisible, and they were invisible the whole time during the campaign. And they were one of the people that I sort of stealth motioned for them to come in along with us. So inside this temple is myself there in the yellow, Sorcerer Paladin. We have 2 rangers. One of them is stealth, which is the one on the left, or invisible, I should say. And then we brought our other paladin, or the other paladin sort of volunteered to come with us as well. And this meant outside we had our barbarian, 2 other rangers, the artificer, and a druid. So the majority of the party was outside, and then we went inside. I don't recall every enemy position. I've only put in red here the ones that I could recall. There were definitely a lot more near the entrance and kind of sprawled out inside this temple. You can kind of see we walked along the path on the right-hand side up into the monk sleeping area, where there's a series of bunks, and there were a couple of monks here. And then we walked to the left into the warden's office. In the warden's office, you'll see this block on the left. This is a bookshelf. And while I was speaking to the warden to get some stuff signed, I forget who or how this went down, but basically, ultimately what ended up happening was the invisible ranger decided to inspect and found a book that did not look like a normal book, and decided to pull on the book to take it. In classic sort of D&D fashion, that book was not a book. It was in fact a lever. And as the book got pulled, the bookshelf started to move and open, revealing a secondary room to the left there. As this bookshelf opened, the warden, obviously, or sitting right there at that desk, immediately became combative, and combat basically initially just sort of immediately rolled. And I happened to roll the highest. And so my first action, I didn't know what I was doing. I just grappled this guy. I didn't know what exactly to do. I didn't want him to run around. And so my first thought was to grapple him. I think in hindsight, maybe attempting to go sorcery point, quicken spell to try and sleep the warden may have been the better option, to attempt to knock them out and then not cause immediate suspicion for people outside, because at this point it was just us and the warden in the room. Nobody else outside had known. And so maybe that would have been the better option, and it's something that I'll keep in mind as well. But I went with grappling this person, so I grappled the warden. I did win. I did succeed on that grapple. And, because I'm grappling, I only get the one attack with my weapon, and so I'm sort of just attacking him with my sword in one hand and grappling with the other. What I didn't expect was for both the ranger and the paladin in my party, I still can't see the other ranger because they're invisible, but they walked into the secret room, and they both ended up going down the stairs that were there. And so that left me and the second ranger here on the right trying to basically kill this warden ourselves, me with only one hand free, and the ranger, trying their best to also deal some damage. But this warden was made of some thicker stuff, and so I don't know yet if they're undead or if they're some sort of creature, or if it's just a tough human enemy. That's something I haven't tried yet. I should have tried smiting to see if the radiant damage did anything. That's definitely something I have to keep in mind. But effectively, after 3 rounds of us attempting to take this guy down, and the 3 rounds that it took for the paladin and the ranger on the left to walk into the room, go down the stairs, it was pitch black down there. There were some doors along the left and right of a long hallway or something. Then they turned around and then walked back up the stairs. That was sort of the 3 rounds. There were 2 monks in this monk sleeping area. And I guess enough time had passed where they were kind of concerned about what was happening in the room. I feel like it was only like a minute maybe that passed by. I forget how long a round is supposed to be. Maybe like 6 seconds. So that's maybe like 20 seconds, and then maybe 30 seconds of having walked in and talked really quickly, and then having the paperwork start to be signed. So, I mean, I'm not going to push back on the DM on that, but it's definitely something where it's like, hey, it's only been a minute. I don't know, if that even, maybe 45 seconds. But hey, it is what it is. So you see one monk kind of walking left from the monk sleeping area into the warden's office. That monk opened the door, and that was kind of their full turn. They saw what was happening. I kind of just have the warden in a chokehold. And then it was my turn, and I decided to use sleep on that monk in the doorway just because I didn't know what was happening. The ranger on the right was actually still in the warden's office with me at the time, but I slept that person. But then obviously there was a second monk in that sleeping area. You see that arrow from the top right going down into that hallway. That monk immediately started running south to alert the other guards because they just see a monk collapse down in the doorway there. And so now we're kind of in this pickle where I've got this person grappled. There's this monk that I've put to sleep, supposed monk. I think they're undead or something like that. Supposed monk that I've cast sleep on in the doorway there. Our ranger has run out to the right and threw a knife, I think, at the one that was running, or a dagger, I should say. I'm not sure. I don't think there was much going to be accomplished there, but they're standing out there now. And then we've got our paladin and our ranger, I believe, still in the left hand room. So they're quite far from being able to do much. That would definitely be, I think, even if they took the dash action, they would get to where maybe the ranger was, maybe a little bit further. But it would take their full action just to kind of run into the space. Ideally, and you see this purple circle here that I've placed on the right, this is where I would ideally be placing web. If I could get over there and kind of line up my line of sight, I would effectively want to cover the door, right? Line the web up along the door so they have to walk through the web if they want to get through to us. And then as well as sort of stretch the web back into the hallway a bit so that way there's sort of like a broader space that they'd have to walk through, and roll that check to see if they get restrained. Ideally, I would be able to do that and then hold concentration while we deal with this warden who I think is close to dead, hopefully, and as well as a sleeping monk. Something, of course, to note is that web is a concentration spell as well, so I'll lose concentration on the sleep that I cast earlier. And then I think we would be okay because we have a series of doors that we can fall back through and kind of choke, use these choke holds to really fight effectively here. And so I'm not too concerned about our survival necessarily. I just think that that very first round is going to be very crucial to how easily these people walk through. And if we give up this first room, this monk sleeping area, immediately, or if we can kind of hold it temporarily. There are, I think I mentioned, there's more enemies down in the broader temple, but I don't recall where their position is. There's probably another like 6 or so sort of peppered out throughout the building. And on top of that, combat did end up breaking out outside in the courtyard while we were in here. Through a series of shenanigans that occurred with our barbarian and some potential wine, a fight broke out. As well as maybe some shenanigans with a druid and a coffin, a stone coffin in a different section of the courtyard. Hilariously, 2 different fights broke out basically at the same time due to some bad rolls trying to move stuff, which is pretty funny. But I fear more for them, and I would love to be able to go and help them just because the courtyard is a much more open space, right? It's a little bit harder strategically to be able to maintain that area. They'll have to find like a building maybe they can kind of leverage, but they're fighting, they're doing their thing over there. I think they're doing okay so far. But 4 enemies actually from the outside came into the temple because they started hearing some noise and some shouting basically. So that's good that we've pulled some additional enemies inside. It does mean we have quite a bit to work through, maybe potentially like 10 enemies or so, and there's only 4 of us. So we really need to make use of every room that we hold and then kind of give up as we need to sort of position. So ideally, I can get over there, cast that web, and then we can kind of hold that door with our rangers and then myself and the paladin kind of making sure that people aren't poking through. A lot of this obviously rests upon my concentration. I don't have Warcaster at this point, but I do have a +7 to my concentration check. So it's not the worst case scenario, and I have that heroic inspiration. I think I'll save that for a crucial role there to maintain concentration on that. I think we can hold this. We just need to clear these 2 guys so that we have sort of stayed in this area, the warden and the one undead monk potentially. I think the critical piece here is figuring out how I'm going to get over to that area on the right. I think ideally I maybe shove, I think I can shove this warden to my left towards the bookcase, kind of towards the other two, and let them kind of handle it. If I can do that successfully, then I can run over to the right without taking an opportunity attack and risking breaking my sleep. That way I can go past the sleeping monk and into a position where I can sorcery point, quicken spell, web, and then position myself kind of along the wall near the door, the south door. I think ideally I would kind of move across here and kind of stay along this wall after casting web, and then that way I don't get popped with any sort of like ranged casts, at least not easily based on the angle of the door. I'll have to double check once we're back in session. But the hope, yes, is to get this guy out, knock the warden over to the left, and then me move over to the right, dropping my concentration on the sleep, me and the ranger turning and destroying this monk hopefully here in the doorway without me losing concentration, allowing the two on the left to handle the warden and their remaining HP on the warden. And then hopefully we hold this door here for a while. This is going to be a battle of attrition, kind of, right? There's a lot of enemies, and we don't know what's going on outside technically. So, we're kind of in bliss thinking that our allies are outside, hanging out in the courtyard. In the meanwhile, they're also fighting for their lives. And so, definitely a very precarious situation we've gotten in here. But very cool, very exciting, and we'll definitely stress test how far this build can go and what I can really do being sort of this hybrid character. I don't have anything like Fireball or anything like that. If we quickly flip back to my character sheet, flipping back to the character sheet, you can see that I've used 2 first level spell slots and I still have all 3 second level. So I still have things like Dragon's Breath, but Dragon's Breath does require concentration, so I wouldn't be able to use that. And Web at the same time. I will likely pop a mirror image. It's likely going to be, go for that web right away, reposition, deal with that monk. And then on that turn, maybe cast mirror image, really solidifying myself as not being able to have my concentration broken. I think that door is going to be crucial for us to maintain. So I think it's worth using a spell slot, a second level spell slot there. And then just use like my melee to deal with some of the enemies there. Potentially casting a Divine Favor to really stretch my melee capabilities, as I think we're going to be fighting for quite some time. That would leave me with just 1 first level spell slot and 1 second level spell slot remaining for the rest of this fight. Now, I do have the ability, obviously, as a sorcerer to convert my spell point or my sorcery points into spell slots. So as far as sorcery points, I think I haven't used any actually in this fight yet. I haven't used any in this fight yet, so I still have my 3 sorcery points. I will need to likely quicken that web if I wanted to, and then that means I'll have 2 more left, which will mean I can potentially create a couple of first level spell slots and then use those for something like smites, just to really deal some big damage to a single target each turn. Or if I really need to, cast Wrathful Smite to maybe fear somebody, or just keep it for shield, right? So I still have some options here. I think I'll likely end up burning an innate sorcery potentially, although I'll have to think about how the fight's going to go. If they do end up getting stuck in the doorway, I think using an innate sorcery would be really good. It might even be really good to use it before I use web, because I believe innate sorcery, if I look at my actions here, I forget if it's a bonus action. Yes. That gives me 1 to my spell save DC. And if I look at web, yeah, so it'll be a 17 dex save, basically, which is quite good. 17 is going to be really tough, I think, for these guys to hit, hopefully. And so it might be worth it to do bonus action, innate sorcery, but I won't be able to do that and quicken spell. I think a lot of it depends on whether I can successfully disengage from this warden. If I flip back to the map here for us, if I can get this warden off of me without taking an opportunity attack somehow and not use my action, I think that would be ideal. If I have to shove him, that means I have to quicken spell to cast web once I get into the other room, which means my bonus action will already be accounted for. It still would be worth it to do this and then cast innate sorcery the turn after for any subsequent creatures that walk into that web, right? It's still the same save, and so it still would be valuable even if I only get to do that in the second turn. So we'll kind of see how that goes with getting this warden off of me without taking the opportunity attack. I really don't want to have to do a concentration check and have my sleep broken, only to then have to run through that one also and take another opportunity attack. Ideally, I'm able to do all this without getting hit. So we'll kind of see how that plays out. But yeah, really action-packed first campaign recap here for Darian. And so yeah, just jumping back over to the character sheet. A very action-packed session 1 here. A lot going on here with the number of people that we have, the kind of shenanigans that can kind of take place. And that's kind of where we landed. This has been a very fun recap. A lot of things to take away from this particular campaign, just because I am playing a little bit more of a intricate class build here with the hybrid, the sort of spell sword. I'm sure there's things that I'm missing, some things I'm not thinking about. Maybe I'm undervaluing certain things in this scenario or overvaluing others. And that's, of course, the point of this channel. If you've played this class and or maybe you've just played so much D&D that you can kind of see what I should be doing here in this case, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I should be doing. I'll likely take a look at them after I do my own decision. That way I'm not, getting advice, but it's something I can look at after our next session. And let me know, what would you change about the build? Is there something that you would be interested in seeing altered? I did mention that I was thinking about maybe only sticking to 3 paladin instead of going all the way to 5, like I did in the build guide video. Let me know your thoughts on that. I do want to lean maybe more into the sorcerer. There's a lot of value there, so we'll kind of see how we feel about things. Maybe go 4 paladin for the extra ASI, but we'll kind of see how that plays out. If you found this useful or fun to watch, feel free to subscribe. There'll be more of these as we go through each of my sessions here. And if not, still jump in the comments. Let me know what you think. This channel is all about learning together, so I'm always down to hear what you all think. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, have a good day. Quicken spell. All right, so we're in the sort of the sections after the sections of the actual video. Wow, this was a long recap. Definitely a lot more involved than my Ollie campaign. Ollie being my Ranger Hunter class in my first campaign. You can see my session 1 recap on my channel. And I do have some concerns, admittedly, about that character. I'll be honest. I kind of, that was my first character, right? I'm still a beginner. And I went with Ranger because I kind of had an idea in my head, and I saw the video, I think, on a Melee Ranger from D4 Deep Dive. And I liked the idea. I made some tweaks myself. And, after playing through the first session, I think I called this out in my recap, there are some concerns about the gameplay loop. As you saw with this recap, just going over the hypotheticals for what I'm going to do once we get back into that combat, I have so many different options, so many different ways to play this out. Whether I want to, choke up that doorway, that hallway with web, and then go mirror image, or if I want to go maybe chromatic orb and try to just AoE burst down those first people in that hallway. Maybe I want to stay in the room that I'm in and deal with the warden. Spells definitely provide such a huge variance in gameplay that it is interesting to think about with like the martial versus caster divide when it comes to gameplay in particular. And maybe this is something just specific to Ranger, but it feels like the gameplay loop that I'm doing right now with, because I am dex-based dual wielding on that character as well, using Hunter's Mark and all of that, it feels like I'm going to be doing that same thing forever if I were to stick with Ranger. Now, my plan is to go actually multi-classing into War Domain Cleric later on and kind of go like a Spirit Guardians thing. I don't know if that's going to be strong or not, but mostly that's just out of the desire to be more helpful to my rogues with the Guided Strike, I think it's called. And to just honestly change up the gameplay a little bit, because when I was looking at the features and stuff later on down the road, if I were to stick single class Ranger, it doesn't seem like the gameplay loop evolves or become easier. You still have to make the tough choices of the fact that you're not a full caster, and so your spell slots and your spell progression is limited. And because of that, you can only use certain spells, right? If you stick single class Ranger, you kind of clash into the Hunter's Mark condition where you're getting features that benefit your hunter's mark as you progress in levels. But you want to be able to use your cool spells in those situations, right? But it means sacrificing some of your features to do it. And so it's a little bit clunky. It doesn't feel as good when you level up. I can see on this character with Darian, I could see being super excited with every level up, right? Even if I just get access to different spells, that's a lot of decision making to make, right? And so I can already see this character being very, very interesting, very engaging, and one that has a very high ceiling for learning how to leverage the abilities in and out of combat. And so there are some concerns with that ranger character. I think it'll still be fine. You know, it'll be okay in that campaign. That campaign is a little bit more of like a weekly dungeon crawl, weekly boss monster type of thing. And so, um, you know, maybe I'll get the opportunity to adjust what I'm doing potentially as we go forward. But I'll try my best to kind of cook something up. We're still level 3, and so there's a lot of time left to figure out if there's a way to maybe multi-class into druid or something and kind of be a little bit more of a hybrid for our team. As far as this particular campaign session, man, there was a lot that went on with so many players. Combats can be a little bit lengthy, but I think we're moving much quicker, even compared to the beginning of the session, compared to the end. I think people are slowly figuring out kind of what their characters are trying to do, and that's something that we'll kind of learn over time together. I don't want to like necessarily tell people how to play their classes or anything, right? That's definitely not what I want to do, especially because I myself don't necessarily know everything. So kind of just letting everybody figuring it out, and then offering advice here and there when I see that I notice something that they could be doing. Yeah, just pulling up that battle image again. Yeah, very interesting battle map. Very interesting position here. Again, I definitely am more concerned about the people outside. I think we can handle our situation here pretty well as long as we hold the doors. And if we do fall back, we make sure we hold the subsequent door, right? We have a series of 3 rooms here, so we can always fall back if needed to reposition and to reapply some crowd control. If I keep at least one second level spell slot available, we can fall back from the monk sleeping area to the wardens, and then I recast web in the second doorway. So, there's always options. I'm not as concerned for us. Mostly concerned for the people outside who are kind of fighting in open combat, open air. Hilariously, the folks, the barbarian, the artificer, and one of the rangers walked over to the wine room and were talking to some of the quote unquote monks in there. And they attempted to get some wine for themselves, triggering combat with the people in there. I was mostly hoping that the barbarian would be with the broader group. He's very powerful. Barbarians are very strong with rage and whatnot. So I was mostly hoping that he would be around, leaving him out there to sort of hold down the fort and be really that front line. And it was just funny that he was tucked away in a room while combat broke out inside there and outside with the druid and the ranger who were left kind of on their own on the opposite side of the courtyard. They did a really good job. I mean, they're surviving. No one's been downed yet after, I don't know how many rounds it's been out there, maybe 3 or 4 rounds of combat out there and inside. I think it's been maybe 3 or 4 rounds for both of us. The 2 groups have been split up. So, I mean, they're doing a good job. I think where they left off was the folks, the barbarian and the 2 others that were in the wine area were able to clear out that area. I think there were maybe 3 or 4 creatures in there that they had to take down. And they've now moved out into the courtyard to kind of reconvene with the 2 others. And the druid and the other ranger that were left alone are kind of holding their own. A really solid, amazing round where I think like they were surrounded by like 5 enemies, and like 4 of the 5 missed or something on their attacks on a particular round, which was a massive, massive round, a huge boon for that. Could have easily have been downed, both of them in that round. And so definitely could have been bad, but they're reconvening now. So I'm hoping that they're able to kind of maybe fortify a position near the stairway to the entrance of this temple. That looked like a choke that they could kind of hold. It was a little bit wider, but better than nothing. I think the rest of the space is pretty much really difficult to fight in. So that's where I would go. Obviously, I'm not going to tell them that. They'll play that out as they kind of want to. So it is funny that the 2 groups ended up having combat kind of burst out. I didn't really know how to make this situation happen without the fight necessarily breaking out. I think the DM we were talking about afterward, because we rode together to the place where we had the session. Um, he was expecting everyone to kind of go in the temple and then have it be a situation where we're fighting out of the temple together, right? Which totally makes sense. The splitting up the group, that was my own call, honestly. It was mostly because I was hoping to maybe do something more stealthy inside, or to maybe learn something, reconvene outside, and then decide what we wanted to do from there. Did not expect the bookshelf to get opened, and definitely didn't expect the fight to break out in the courtyard. So, but as is the case with D&D in general, the best laid plans, or in my case, my plans weren't even very good to begin with, and so definitely in complete shambles here. But it's definitely a lot of fun, and it's definitely a nice little puzzle to kind of figure out how we want to execute this. But this has been the Quick and Spell segment here, the show after the show. Thank you all for tuning in and for watching. Appreciate you guys checking out the stuff we're doing here on a beginner YouTube channel, a beginner D&D YouTube channel. Still learning the game, and so, but having an absolute blast. Definitely wish I played this at some point sooner in my life, but better late than never. So thank you all for checking it out, and hope you all have a great day. Take care.